Hi and welcome to the latest KV421 podcast, and in fact this is the sixth and last one of the year, a week ahead of our final session together on Saturday the 25th of April. I've posted on Student Centre already a PowerPoint PowerPoint presentation which goes along with this podcast. And also an assessment checklist which your year tutor, your support tutor in your Saturday session will go through with you. So today's podcast is looking at the idea of professional formation, and that's particularly appropriate as you're working towards the final assessment task of this module, which is your summative piece, due to be handed in with the other material on the Friday the 8th of May. So let's say a bit more about what I mean by professional formation. So you came onto the course with history, if you like. You came onto the course with a background. You came onto the course already working with children and young people. You came onto the course wanting to develop your practice and wanting to be recognised professionally for developing that practice. And so you're bringing together a number of different dimensions, of different identities as part of that professional formation. And I want to think about three particular identities or three particular selves that we bring to that process. First of all, the personal self. This notion that we bring with us a whole history, a whole lifetime of experiences, motivations about why we came into the work in the first place, perhaps previous work we've undertaken. Perhaps there was somebody that really inspired you to come onto the course, or that inspired you to work with children and young people in the first place. I had when I was at school, I was a drama teacher called Dave Burrows, who was just brilliant and was just the most, when I was a 16, 17-year-old, he was the person that kind of really inspired me and kept me on the straight and narrow and gave me a kick up the bum when I needed it. And he was the person, in fact, that really made me think about wanting to work with other young people myself. And it may be that there's people along the way that you've met that have kind of helped develop who you are professionally. So with the notion that we bring with us our background, our experiences, maybe either working directly with children and young people or working with in other professions as well. And we bring with us also our values, a set of values that we feel are important to us. So that personal self that we bring into the work is really important. And then, of course, while you've been at university already for a year, you've developed your academic self. And the academic self is perhaps a new challenge for you, particularly if you've not studied formally for a while. And it brings with it a set of challenges which are perhaps slightly different from challenges we have elsewhere in our lives. Certainly being assessed fairly regularly is a challenge that most people don't particularly relish, but hopefully you're getting used to it now. That sense that you complete some work and that one of us then gives you some feedback about that work. And that's part of the process of becoming professionally qualified. It's a part of the process of, if you like, testing your knowledge, testing your understanding, developing your thinking, and getting some feedback on that. And that feedback process can be challenging for us. It can be inspiring, it can be rewarding as well. And I'd really like you to think a bit more about how you receive that feedback and how you make sense of that feedback. With feedback, I think it's always important to think about how you make sense of it and how you then perhaps take it on board where you think it's justifiable. But also, particularly, I would encourage you to ask for feedback that you particularly want. Take opportunity to seek either from people at work or from people on the course or from tutors to ask for very specific feedback. As you become more confident as a student, hopefully you'll become more confident in asking for the type of feedback that you need. So that developing the academic self is an important part of the course. And then finally, the third dimension that I'm referring to here is the professional self. And by the professional self, I mean you as a practitioner working with children and young people, the way you're developing your skills, your knowledge, and your professional identity. And that professional self is obviously the one that is the most important one that's going forward for you in your professional formation. Now, the reason why on this particular module and the module that you'll be taking similarly next year, the reason why we focus particularly on the notion of reflective practice is we're interested in helping you to develop your professional narrative. And by your professional narrative, I mean the way that you're able to develop the stories that we tell about ourselves, and to the way we can develop our identity through writing and through talking and discussing our work. Now, the more you're able to do that, the more it gives you a sense of connectedness to your professional role and your professional purpose. And that's really important. That's the bit that makes you who you are and makes you the unique professional that you are, rather than simply thinking about producing professionals with an identical professional identity. Hopefully by now you've picked up that we're really interested in helping you to develop yourself as a professional in the best way that you can, and that will mean that you'll be a different professional to the next person. So in that terms of that professional narrative, we're looking at how you bring in that previous self that we've talked about, that previous identity, that you bring in those values, that history of why you came into the work, that what you bring with you in terms of previous experiences, and the way that you bring with a sense of connectedness and relationships in the work is really important. And then you bring that into the practitioner in the moment. That as you're working with children and young people, increasingly you have a self-confidence in being able to work in the moment and have an awareness of yourself working in the moment. And by that, I think it's a bit like whilst you're working with children and young people, clearly you're involved in whatever's happening at that time. But you've also got part of you that, in a sense, has an awareness of yourself doing that work. So, if you like, you're able to develop what we sometimes refer to as your internal supervisor. A sense of yourself working in the moment, and also a sense of being able to then adapt and change as you are faced with new challenges in your practice. So that flexibility, that creativity of being able to work in the moment is really important. But also a sense of when things are working well, about being in that sense of flow and connectedness, and hopefully that sense of creativity that you might have experienced, when the work seems to go naturally and you are able to adapt in the moment to new challenges and new practices. So our narrative helps us in the present, and it helps us to develop our practice in the moment. And the final aspect of narrativity is that it helps us develop our practice going into the future. It helps us to face new challenges. It helps us face challenges perhaps that we haven't experienced before, and helps us adapt and flex and bend our professionality to cope with new situations. It also helps us accommodate new knowledge and new skills. So that, if you like, our professionality isn't a fixed and rigid professionality. It's an adaptable, malleable, flexible professionality. And that helps us develop our practice into new situations, into new roles. I'm guessing that some of you may have changed your role. You may have changed your role over the past year. You may be thinking about changing your role. You may be thinking about how your practice might change. You may even be thinking of applying for a new job. And we want to support that professionality in being able to accommodate and embrace new change. One of the interesting things is, as I record this, is I think we're about 2.5 weeks away from the election. And the election and potentially a new government may well bring in new practices, may bring in new ways of working, may shift the strategy, may shift the priorities in our work. And being able to accommodate those changes is an important part of our professionality as well. So this notion of professional narrative as being part of our professionality is, in a sense, the final theme of the module, and hopefully one that will take you into your final assignment for this particular module. Just before we end, the last dimension I want to kind of mention, if you like, is that although the emphasis very much has been on you developing your individual professional identity, your individual professionality, clearly, of course, we're very keen on supporting our connectedness to others, and if you like, supporting communities of practitioners. And you'll see in the PowerPoint presentation I posted reference to something called communities of practice. And we feel that connectedness that hopefully you'll experience of others in a similar role and a similar professional identity has been enhanced over the year whilst you've been on the course. And we'll be developing that further next year, particularly going forward in terms of your reflective practice groups over the coming year. That way that we interact with other professionals, the way that we get feedback from other professionals and give feedback to other professionals and feel that connectedness as part of a professional community is a really important element of the course as well. Okay, so professional identity, professionality, professional narrative and a community of practice. Those are the kind of big ideas, if you like, of today's podcast. Hopefully it was interesting as always, and I look forward to seeing you around next Saturday. We're in the same rooms as usual, and with any luck the sun will be shining as well. So I look forward to seeing you then. Cheers for now.